Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. I know the devil fruit of One Piece's greatest enemy and villain, Imu-sama, something that was shown in the manga but we didn't notice, and in today's video I'm going to reveal to all of you the contract fruit, the most dangerous fruit in One Piece. I hope for your support to help our crew win, and to do so, you just need to click the thumbs up button, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. By doing this, you will win an incredible devil fruit, so just comment which fruit you want. Guys, the idea of Imu-sama having a contract fruit, something that perhaps resembles what in other worlds would be called a demonic pact, is honestly something I see as more symbolic than literal. But it's exactly in that symbolic realm that One Piece gains its greatest strength. Because unlike other stories that hide meaning between the lines, Oda does the opposite. He hides it in the absurd. And when we think of Imu, the first thing that comes to mind isn't a physical being, but something greater, a concept, a kind of entity that only makes sense once we accept that absolute power doesn't always need to be direct. It hides in the details. Imu doesn't speak. Imu doesn't show emotions. Imu hasn't even been named by anyone within the story, only by us, the readers. And to be blunt, maybe he's not a king of the world, but rather a kind of system embodied, the spirit of global control itself. And when I say that maybe he has a contract fruit, I'm not thinking of something like Teach's Yami Yami no Mi or Whitebeard's fruit, where power is raw and physical. I'm imagining something closer to the manipulation of will, a type of fruit that allows him to offer people what they most desire, be it protection, status, or a place at the top, but at a price. And that price might be the person's very essence, the soul, as you suggested. Or perhaps even more painful, absolute obedience. Think about the Gorosei, 5 figures who already seem to be at the very top. But in chapter 1085, when we see them kneel before Imu, it hits you like a punch to the gut. Because if they are that powerful and still beneath him, that changes the entire command structure. Kneeling isn't just a sign of respect, it's an act of submission, maybe even a reminder that they owe their position to him, as if in some distant past they accepted a contract, a kind of deal where they gained immortality or a special kind of power in exchange for becoming Imu's eyes and hands in the real world. And if it's true that Imu grows stronger with every soul that signs a contract with him, then it's not far-fetched to think he's already done this with dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people over the centuries. Which lines up with the idea that he has lived since the Void Century. Because if the price is the soul, and he truly collects each one, then he's accumulating not just power, but existence. Maybe that's what keeps him alive. Not time, but the sum of all the pacts already made. And this brings us to the matter of Saturn. When the Gorosei appear at Egghead, even though all of them look terrifying, it's Saint Saturn who shows something different. That scene in chapter 1095, when he appears with that demonic body, with horns, glowing eyes, and a presence that paralyzes even the boldest, might have been the biggest clue that they're not ordinary humans. I believe their forms are a direct reflection of the pact they made, and following the idea of a contract, perhaps each one received a different aspect of Imu's original power, as if he split his gifts into 5 specific agreements. And it's worth remembering that in that very chapter, when Saturn steps onto the ground and all the pacifistas stop attacking, there's a silence, a respect, a silent command. But when Luffy resists and when Bonnie reacts with that mysterious energy, Saturn hesitates. Maybe because the contract he holds doesn't work the same way on those who still have a strong enough inherited will. And if Saturn hesitates, Imu doesn't, because he's the final link, the one who never loses the bet, since he's the one who writes the rules. Now let's consider a hypothesis. If this power really exists and it's based on contracts, then the inevitable question is, who else has made a deal with Imu and is still alive? Maybe Kaido himself, who always talked about losing his life and being reborn as something more. Maybe even Doflamingo, who knew too much, understood the inner workings of the world, and still remained relevant. Perhaps even some of the older celestial dragons. The truth is, the contract might not be limited to high-ranking figures. It could have been offered even to ordinary people at strategic moments. The idea of a contract fruit also explains why the world government is so hard to topple. It's not just because they have resources, military power, and science. It's because maybe all their leaders are bound by an invisible agreement, a cursed clause that forces them to obey as long as they exist. Maybe Imu doesn't need to shout, threaten, or even appear, because the pact is already signed, and whoever breaks that pact pays a price we may have seen exacted more than once in the series. King Cobra of Alabasta, for instance, paid dearly for his curiosity in chapter 1085, because perhaps he got too close to the forbidden clause. And the most curious thing is to think about the contrast. Luffy, the guy who refuses to make promises, who acts on impulse, who never writes down how he feels, may be the ultimate natural enemy of someone like Imu, because he represents the opposite of a contract. He demands nothing, charges nothing, sets no rules. He trusts, and that's why he frees. That's why he attracts allies. And maybe that's why he'll be able one day to defeat someone with such a dominating fruit. If it's real, the contract fruit may be the very origin of the fear that governs the world. A power that, instead of causing natural disasters, manipulates people with what they most want. A power that gives only to later demand payment, that delivers only to later imprison. Maybe that's what Oda is building silently. And if so, then the final battle won't be just one of strength, but of desire. Between a man who offers everything in exchange for the soul, and another who offers nothing but invites you to dream. If we accept that Imu-sama truly has a contract fruit, a fruit that offers power in exchange for essence, will, or whatever makes someone who they are, then maybe that's the root not only of fear, but of the very stagnation of the world. Because the world of One Piece is full of sparks ready to ignite, islands with revolutionary ideals, people with inherited will, characters carrying flames that span generations. And yet everything remains in silence, as if someone is constantly putting out each small fire before it becomes a blaze. Maybe Imu does this not through force, but with promises, with contracts, with terms hidden in sweet silent words. And this completely changes how we see the Tenryubitos themselves. Because there has always been something uncomfortable about the fact that they consider themselves gods, but are so grotesque, fragile, foolish. Maybe they are just descendants of the ones who signed the first contract. Maybe the so-called divinity is hereditary but completely empty, a bubble made to keep them away from the truth. Because if the fruit of the contract exists, maybe the price also passes from generation to generation. The father sells, but the son pays. And that's why they live in closed chambers, with masks, surrounded by slaves, not for grandeur, but out of fear, an ancestral fear that something once demanded will one day return. And what if the contract isn't just with individuals, but with nations? Maybe entire countries are bound by invisible clauses. Wano, for example, lived isolated for centuries. Was it by their own choice, or because someone signed a contract that required absolute silence? Maybe Joy Boy tried to break it once. Maybe he was the first to say no. And that's why he lost the chance to fulfill the promise. Because breaking a contract takes more than strength. It takes internal freedom. And that's something Luffy has in abundance. I think, for example, about how Blackbeard himself sees the world. He also wants power. He also manipulates. But there's a huge difference between him and Imu. Blackbeard wants to take, to conquer. Imu maybe wants you to give it willingly, like a cosmic banker who smiles and extends a hand, saying that everything you've ever wanted is right there. All you have to do is sign. And when you sign, you're no longer you. You become a pawn, a reflection of another's will. Chapter 1060 shows something that, if you look closely, gives you chills. The complete destruction of Lulusia. No warning, no hesitation, no resistance. A beam that fell from the sky like a silent punishment. But what if that's not just technology? What if it's the execution of a contract? Maybe Lulusia refused a pact. Maybe someone in that country dared to say no, and the result was being erased. Literally wiped off the map. It's the kind of thing that reinforces the omnipotence surrounding Imu, not as a divinity of faith, but as an invisible judge. And the craziest thing of all is to think that maybe Imu doesn't even have a true form. That shadow sitting on the empty throne might just be an avatar, a representation of the system he created, a system where everything is negotiable, everything has a price, everything can be given if you accept giving up yourself. And if it's true that he has been alive since the lost century, then it no longer matters if he's human or not. What matters is that he survives by feeding off this network of silent pacts. And here comes the most important question. Why has no one challenged him yet? Maybe because no one could. Or maybe because, as you suggested, only someone who doesn't follow the rules can break the clauses. Someone like Luffy, who laughs when he should fear, who extends a hand when he should mistrust. Someone who doesn't accept exchanges, who gives without expecting anything in return. He is literally the opposite of a contract. He is chance in the form of a person. And maybe Oda is building just that. The idea that absolute freedom is the only force capable of breaking the system of agreements that Imu created. Luffy's fruit, which carries laughter, Irreverence, disobedience, might be the only one capable of undoing the oldest knot in the world. And that's why the final battle won't be about swords or punches, but about essence. One who strengthens when controlled, and the other who grows when trusted. One who lives by clauses, the other who lives by promises without writing. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.